So just listen to this for a second and think about it. I just think you're being really defensive right now. I'm trying to have a mature conversation with you, but you're clearly too triggered to engage with me productively. Maybe we should revisit this issue when you worked through your issues. Now, that sounds emotionally intelligent, doesn't it? Someone who understands psychology, who can name emotions, who's trying to de escalate things. But really, if you look beneath it, read between the lines, and listen carefully, here's what's actually happening. They just weaponized therapy language to shut you down. They made your legitimate concerns about their defensiveness. They positioned themselves as the emotionally mature person and you as the broken one who needs to work through your issues. That's not emotional intelligence. That's manipulation dressed up in the language of emotional intelligence. And it's everywhere. You can see it in relationships, in workplaces, in families. People using psychological language and awareness to control, not to connect, to control, not to understand, but to manipulate and to dominate. I'm Rahul Nair from the Huddle Institute of Psychology, Philosophy, and Spirituality. This is episode 10 of season 3, and today we are going to enter into the territory most emotional intelligence content won't touch, and that is the dark side. When EQ becomes a weapon. So, let's start with a clarification. Emotional intelligence is obviously and genuinely valuable. The ability to recognize, understand, and manage your own emotions, and to recognize and respond appropriately to others' emotions is essential for healthy relationships. We know that. We all know that. And we understand that. And we appreciate that. But here's what the emotional intelligence industry do not talk about. EQ skills can be used for good and for harm. The same awareness that allows you to connect deeply with someone can also be used to expose or to exploit, rather, their vulnerabilities. So let me repeat that. The EQ skills can be used for good or for harm. The same awareness that allows you to connect deeply with someone can also be used to exploit their vulnerabilities. Think about it. If you understand what makes someone feel guilty, you can manipulate them through guilt. If you understand what triggers someone's insecurity, you can use that against them. If you know how to sound reasonable and calm while making someone else feel crazy, then you can gaslight someone with perfect composure. This is emotional manipulation. And the more emotionally intelligent the manipulator is, the harder it is to spot because they're fluent, they are so fluent in the language of healthy communication. They know what empathy sounds like, they know what accountability looks like. They can perform both without feeling either. Without feeling either. Here's the systems thinking piece behind this that I want to bring forth. Manipulation isn't about individual behavior, it's about power dynamics. It's about power dynamics within relational systems. The manipulator uses emotional awareness to maintain control, to keep the other person confused, destabilized, or in a one down position. In a healthy in a healthy relational system, both people use emotional awareness to expand mutual understanding and create conditions for both to thrive. However, in a manipulative system, one person uses emotional awareness to constrain the other person's options and maintain their own advantage. The difference isn't in the skills themselves, it's in the intent and the system outcome. That's the difference. So, in this episode, we are going to break down what genuine emotional intelligence looks like versus what manipulized or manipulation disguised as EQ looks like. The red flags that signal you're dealing with weaponized emotional awareness, and how to protect yourself without becoming cynical about emotional intelligence itself. So, let's jump straight in. Firstly, the psychological framework. Let's start by understanding what emotional intelligence actually is and what it is not. Now, emotional intelligence, as defined by psychologists Peter Salovey, John Mayer, and popularized by Daniel Goleman, has four core components, four main components. Namely, first, self awareness. In other words, recognizing your own emotions as they happen and understanding their impact. Secondly, self management, regulating your emotional responses appropriately. Thirdly, social awareness, recognizing and understanding other people's emotions, empathy, basically. And fourth, relationship management. In other words, using emotional awareness to navigate relationships effectively. Now, this is powerful stuff. Genuine emotional intelligence allows you to communicate clearly about difficult things, it allows you to manage conflict without destroying connection, It allows you to respond to other people's pain with compassion. It allows you to regulate yourself under stress. And it also allows you to build trust through consistency and attunement. All of this, very powerful stuff. But notice what's in that definition. Nothing about intent. Nothing about whether you use these skills to benefit others or to exploit them. That's missing in the definition. Manipulation happens when emotional intelligence is used strategically to control, to confuse, or to exploit someone, rather than to connect or to collaborate. So, here are the most common ways that EQ, emotional intelligence, gets weaponized. First, weaponized therapy speak. By this, what I mean is using psychological language to shut down legitimate concerns. Let me give you some examples. You're projecting. Translation is your concerns are not real, they're about your issues, not my behavior. That's your trigger, not my problem. Translation: I have no responsibility for how my actions affect you. Another example: I think you need to work on your attachment issues. Translation: your needs are pathological, mine are reasonable. So, these are some examples of weaponized therapy speak when people use psychological language to people down, shut down people's legitimate concerns. Another way EQA gets weaponized is through emotional gaslighting. We did a video and a blog post on gaslighting in season 1. Uh, if you go back in our YouTube channel, you'll see an episode on gaslighting, making you question your emotional reality. That's what this is about. So, for example, saying things like, you're being too sensitive. In other words, your feelings are wrong. Or, I never said that. You're remembering it wrong. In other words, don't trust your own perception. Another way of putting this is, you're overreacting. I was just joking. In other words, your reaction is the problem, not what I did. So that's emotional gaslighting. Another way emotional intelligence get weaponized is strategic vulnerability. By this, what I mean is using selective emotional disclosure to manipulate. Like, for example, sharing just enough information, just enough vulnerability to make you feel guilty for setting boundaries. Another example is crying or showing distress to avoid accountability. Another example is using past trauma as an excuse for current harmful behavior. Another example is empathy as performance. This is another way emotional intelligence is weaponized. By this, I mean demonstrating understanding without genuine care. So you're just showing understanding without the care that actually should be coming with it, that should be coming with it. So, for example, I hear that you're upset, while continuing the harmful behavior, or mirroring your language back to you to appear understanding while ignoring the content. So, whatever you're saying, they'll mirror back to you just to show that they're understanding, but they're not really understanding, or they're not uh, connecting with the content of what you're saying. Another way is apologizing beautifully without changing anything. Yet another way of weaponizing emotional intelligence is calm as dominance. By this, what I mean is remaining composed while making the other person feel unstable. So, for example, let's have a rational conversation. In other words, when the other person is expressing legitimate concern, someone says, let's have a rational conversation. Or, I'm just trying to understand why you're so upset. Positioning their upset as unreasonable. Using measured tone to make the other person's emotion seem excessive by contrast. These are all ways of weaponizing emotional intelligence. Now, what is the difference between the role of empathy and cognitive empathy? It is something that I want to talk about briefly. The distinction is actually very crucial for us to understand. Affective empathy is feeling with someone. Affective empathy is feeling with someone. You feel their pain, their joy, their fear. It's automatic, emotional, and it drives compassion. Cognitive empathy is understanding someone's state intellectually without necessarily feeling it. You can recognize that someone is hurt without being moved by it. Genuine emotional intelligence includes both. You understand what someone is feeling, cognitive, and you care about it, affective. Manipulators often have high cognitive empathy, very high cognitive empathy, and pretty low on affective empathy. They can read you perfectly. They understand exactly what you're feeling and what would hurt or comfort you. But they don't actually care about you. They use that understanding in very strategic ways. This is what makes certain personality types, particularly those with narcissistic or antisocial traits, so effective at manipulation. They're emotionally intelligent in the cognitive sense. They just lack the compassion that would prevent them from using that intelligence to harm you and to harm other people. Here's an important marker of genuine emotional intelligence. An important marker is cognitive flexibility, the ability to shift perspectives, hold multiple truths at the same time, and adapt your approach based on the context. It's an important marker of genuine emotional intelligence. Someone with authentic EQ can hold both. I was hurt by what they did, and they didn't intend to hurt me at the same time. They can recognize that multiple people's experiences are valid even when they conflict. A manipulator lacks this flexibility. They have very rigid narratives. When someone can't hold complexity, when they can't acknowledge that both of you might have valid points, that's a red flag to watch out for, that their emotional intelligence is performative rather than genuine. That's an important red flag for you to keep in mind. Now, let's look at this through the systems thinking lens. In any relational system, there are obviously power dynamics. There are information flows, feedback loops. Manipulators don't create these dynamics, but they exploit them. They understand the system better than you do. They know which buttons to push. They know how to create confusion so you can't see the pattern clearly. They know how to position themselves as the victim when they're actually the one causing the harm. This is systems awareness used for personal gain at your cost, at your expense. In contrast, authentic emotional intelligence. Authentic emotional intelligence uses systems awareness to benefit all parts of the system, everyone. The difference is that manipulation constrains system possibilities, authentic EQ expands them. That's the difference from a systems point of view. Manipulators are skilled at creating self reinforcing feedback loops that keep themselves in control. So, for example, the gaslighting loop. They do something harmful, you express hurt, they tell you you're overreacting, you question yourself, you apologize for being upset, they accept your apology magnanimously, the harmful behavior continues, you've learned not to voice your concerns, and the loop reinforces itself. Each iteration, each iteration of this loop makes you likely, less likely to trust your own perception and more likely to defer to theirs. The system stabilizes around their version of reality. Now, what is the difference between influence and control? That's another point that is worth discussing. This is a crucial systems distinction as far as this topic is concerned. Influence influence expands influence expands the other person's options. Here's how I see it. What do you think? Let's figure this out together. Control constrains the other person's options. If you really cared about me, you'd do this. I guess I'm just a terrible person then. Forcing you to reassure them instead of addressing your concern. So, influence expands the other person's options, whereas control is always constraining the other person's options. Authentic emotional intelligence operates through influence. Manipulation, on the other hand, operates through control. Authentic EQ operates through influence. manipulation operates through control. And control, even when executed with emotional sophistication, damages the relational system. It's not good. It creates resentment, distrust, and eventual collapse. Or it creates a dynamic where one person is perpetually in a one down position, constantly managing the manipulator's emotional state at the expense of their own needs. That's what happens. Now, does this dynamic benefit everyone or just one person? The clearest way to distinguish manipulation from EQ is to ask this question: does this person's use of emotional awareness create conditions where both people can thrive, or does it primarily serve their own needs? That's how you distinguish. Let me repeat that. The best way to distinguish authentic emotional intelligence from manipulative emotional intelligence is to ask, does this benefit everyone or just one person? If conversations leave you feeling confused, small, guilty, or crazy, while they consistently feel vindicated, that's a system structured around their benefit, not mutual well being. On the other hand, if conversations leave both of you feeling more understood, even when you disagree, that's a system structured around mutual respect and genuine connection. That's how you differentiate. So, some examples. Let's start with a romantic one. After a fight where Alex was genuinely hurtful, they apologize. I'm so sorry. I know I have issues with anger. It's from my childhood. I'm really working on it. I just need you to be patient with me whilst I heal. Well, it sounds very emotionally intelligent. They are acknowledging the problem, taking responsibility, referencing their trauma. But notice something in what Alex said. There is no commitment to change behavior, no acknowledgement of your pain, only their struggle. And you're now positioned as unsupportive if you don't remain patient while they continue to hurt you. That's manipulation disguised as self awareness. Contrast with genuine accountability. It could be something like, what I said was hurtful and wrong. I can see it really hurt you, and that's not okay, regardless of what I was feeling. I'm going to work on managing my anger better, and I'm going to check in with you about whether you're actually seeing change, not just hearing promises. You see how that is different. So that's an example. Now, what does this mean from a practical point of view? So, how do you tell the difference between authentic EQ and manipulation? Here are the red flags and the protective strategies that I want you to take away from this video, from this episode. The red flags that signal manipulation. First, number one, they use psychological language to avoid accountability. For example, that's your codependency talking. You're trauma bonded to this narrative. I think you need to examine your attachment style, all of this psychological language. When someone consistently deflects your concerns by pathologizing you, that's manipulation. Secondly, they're experts on your emotions, strangers to their own. They can tell you exactly what you're feeling, what's wrong with you, what you need to work on, but they never seem to have the same level of insight about themselves. That's a very clear red signal to watch out for. Another one is the third one, conversations that leave you feeling confused or nuts. If you regularly walk away from interactions questioning your own perception, memory, or sanity, that's gaslighting, not just poor communication. Number four, what to watch out for. They are calm, you're emotional. So they remain composed while you get upset. They they use that as evidence. They use that as evidence that you are the problem. See, you're too emotional to have this conversation. That's what they will say. Genuine emotional intelligence recognizes that emotion is valid. Manipulation, remember, uses composure as a power move. Uses composure as a power move. Another red flag to watch out for is that they lack cognitive flexibility. They can't hold complexity. They can't acknowledge both perspectives might be valid. It's always they're right, you're wrong. They're the victim, you're the perpetrator. They're rational, you're irrational. That's always the narrative. So there is no cognitive flexibility. Number six, what you need to watch out for, their apologies never lead to behavior change. They apologize beautifully. They use all the right words, and then nothing changes. They do exactly the same thing again and again. That's performative accountability, not genuine repair, right? So, those are some six red signals to really watch out for. Then, some strategies on how to protect yourself. Number one, trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is off. Don't let psychological language override you or override your instinct that you're being manipulated. Number two, look for patterns, not isolated incidents. One conversation where someone uses therapy speak dismissively might be clumsy, but a pattern of it, if you notice, then surely it's a sign of manipulation. Number three, notice the system outcome. Does this relationship expand your sense of self or does it shrink it? Do you feel more capable or less capable? More confident in your perceptions or constantly second guessing? If the system consistently leaves you feeling small, confused, or guilty, regardless of how emotionally intelligent the other person sounds, then trust that data. Number four, set boundaries based on behavior, not explanations. So you can have compassion for someone's struggle while protecting yourself from their harmful behavior. Those things can coexist. So set boundaries based on behavior and not just explanations. Seek external reality checking. Manipulators are really good at isolating you from other perspectives or from other people's perspectives. Talk to trusted friends, therapists, or family members. Get an outside view of whether the dynamic is problematic or not as it feels. And number six, develop your own cognitive flexibility. The antidote to manipulation is your own capacity to hold complexity. What I mean by that is practice noticing. They might have a point about X, and they're also avoiding accountability for Y. Both can be true. Don't let them collapse into one narrative. You can keep that complexity. You can maintain that complexity. You can hold those conflicting things in your mind. That requires cognitive flexibility. Now, for parents, I want to actually leave something specific, teaching kids about authentic versus performative emotional intelligence. It's a small piece that I wanted to share about this topic with parents. If you are raising children, one of the most important things that you can teach them is the difference between genuine emotional intelligence and manipulation. That's one of the most important lessons that you can impart to them. Model authentic emotional intelligence by saying things like, I made a mistake, I am sorry, here's what I'll do differently. That's modeling. Name manipulation when you see it. When someone uses calm to make you feel crazy for being upset, that's not emotional maturity. That's power move. That's what you teach your children. Teach them to trust their gut whilst also being open to feedback. If someone's words sound right, but something feels wrong, pay attention to that feeling. It's important. That's what you teach your children. When you recognize you've been manipulated, if you see yourself in some of these patterns, that's not the end of the story. Awareness is the first step. Ask yourself, am I using emotional awareness to connect or to control? Do I want mutual understanding or do I want to win? Am I actually open to other people's perspective? Or am I performing openness while staying rigidly attached to my own narrative? Genuine change requires cognitive flexibility, as I mentioned time and again. The willingness to genuinely shift your perspective and recognize that your way of seeing things is not the only valid one. So now we are coming to an end of this episode. And here's what I really want you to take away. Emotional intelligence is genuinely valuable, but like any tool, it can be used to build or to harm. The difference between authentic EQ and manipulation is not the skills themselves, it's in the intent and the system outcome, as I mentioned before. Authentic emotional intelligence expands mutual understanding and creates conditions for everybody to thrive, whereas manipulation constrains people's options and maintains power for just one person at the expense of other people. Red flags include weaponized therapy speak, gaslighting through calm, strategic vulnerability without genuine accountability, and the inability to hold complexity. These are all red flags. The clearest signal is the system outcome. Always ask, do you feel more capable and grounded in this relationship or more confused and small? Cognitive flexibility, I want to remind you again, is the ability to hold multiple perspectives at the same time, is one of the most important protections against manipulation. When you recognize that they might have a particular point about X and they are yet avoiding accountability for Y, you're less likely to be pulled into their one sided narrative. So, that is some of the recap points and some of the most important takeaways from this episode about about emotional intelligence and emotional manipulation. Now, in the next episode, we are going to be looking at another form of manipulation that's incredibly common, but rarely named very clearly, called passive aggression. The psychology of saying everything while saying nothing, and why some people can never just be direct. Now, if you've dealt with emotional manipulation, coming back to today's episode, or recognized it in yourself, then I'd welcome your thoughts in the comments section below. Share your perspectives. What helped you see it most clearly? Do share your comments below. So, that is it for this episode about emotional intelligence and the difference between emotional intelligence and genuine emotional intelligence and emotional intelligence used for manipulation. I hope this was very useful for you. As I said, next week is about passive aggression. Until then, keep watching our channel. See you in the next one. Ciao for now.